They say crossing into wolf territory is suicide. They're right. Lyra Hale knew it the moment Alpha King Rael Thorn's claws closed around her throat in the darkness. One stolen flower. One desperate act to save her dying father. And now, pinned against frozen earth by a predator who could snap her neck with a thought, she waited for death. But death didn't come. Instead, the most feared ruler in the north did something far worse. He smiled. Welcome to a story of forbidden borders, impossible choices, and the dangerous line between captivity and desire. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. This is going to be a wild ride. Boasi. The wind that night tasted like death. Lyra crouched at the edge of the tree line, staring across the boundaries she'd been warned about since childhood. The Thornwood. Wolf territory. A place where humans didn't go unless they wanted to disappear. She was about to become one of those stories. Her hands shook as she adjusted the crude pack on her shoulders. Inside, rope, a knife too dull to be useful, dried meat she couldn't afford to eat, and a map drawn by a half-drunk merchant who swore he'd seen the blood moon rose growing near the Alpha King's fortress. She'd paid him with her mother's wedding ring, the last thing of value her family had. It better be real. Behind her, miles away in the frontier settlement of Ashvale, her father was dying. The plague had taken root in his lungs 3 weeks ago, turning his cough wet and his skin gray. The village healer had stopped coming. There was nothing left to try, she'd said. Just wait. Lyra wasn't good at waiting. She pulled her cloak tighter and stepped across the line. The forest swallowed her whole. It was colder here. Not just temperature, something deeper. The trees were older, thicker, their branches woven so tight overhead that moonlight barely touched the ground. The air smelled like wet earth and something else. Musk. Wild. Lyra moved carefully, each step deliberate. She'd heard the stories. Wolves could smell fear from a mile away, hear a heartbeat through snow. She tried to keep her steady, but it hammered against her ribs like it wanted out. An hour in, she found the first marker. A skull. Deer, maybe. Hung from a low branch with strips of leather, eye sockets packed with dried moss. A warning. She swallowed hard and kept moving. 2 hours in, the snow started. Fat, heavy flakes that stuck to her hair and eyelashes, muffling the world into silence. She pulled the map from her coat, squinting at the faded ink. The merchant had marked the rose's location near a stone outcrop shaped like a broken fang. North. She was supposed to go north. But which way was north now? The wind shifted and Lyra froze. Somewhere close, too close, something moved. Not wind, not snow. Breathing. Her pulse spiked. She turned slowly, knife already in her hand, though she knew it wouldn't help. If they'd found her, she was already dead. The wolf stepped out of the shadows like it had always been there. Massive, black fur dusted with snow, eyes that gleamed amber in the dark. It didn't growl, didn't bare teeth, just watched her with an intelligence that made her stomach drop. This wasn't an animal. This was a shifter. Her voice cracked. She forced herself to stand straighter, even though every instinct screamed to run. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need... The wolf's lips pulled back, and Lyra's words died. It wasn't alone. 3 more emerged from the trees. Bigger, scarred, moving with the eerie coordination of a pack that had hunted together for years. They circled her slowly, cutting off every escape route, and Lyra realized with cold clarity that she'd made a terrible mistake, not in crossing, in thinking she'd ever had a choice. Please. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. My father is dying. I just need the rose. I'll leave. You'll never see me again. The largest wolf, the first one, tilted its head, almost curious. Then it lunged. Lyra hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the air from her lungs. Claws dug into her shoulders, pinning her flat, and she stared up into a maw full of teeth that could tear her apart in seconds. She didn't scream. There was no point. But she didn't close her eyes either. If she was going to die, she'd look it in the face. The wolf's breath was hot against her skin. Its growl rumbled through her chest, and then it stopped. The weight on her shoulders eased. The wolf stepped back, and in the space between one heartbeat and the next, The shape of it began to change. Bones cracked, fur receded, limbs elongated, twisted, reformed. When the shift finished, a man stood over her, and not just any man. Lyra had seen sketches, heard descriptions from traders who'd survived encounters at the border, but nothing prepared her for the reality of Alpha King Rael Thorn in the flesh. Tall, broad-shouldered, built like something carved from stone and violence. His hair was dark, falling just past his jawline, still damp from the shift. Scars marked his chest and arms, old wounds that told stories of survival. But it was his eyes that froze her in place. Still amber, still wolf, still watching her like prey. "Well," he said, voice low and rough, "this is interesting." Lyra scrambled backward, snow soaking through her clothes. "I wasn't—" "You crossed the boundary." He crouched, resting his forearms on his knees, utterly unbothered by his nakedness or the cold. "That's a crime punishable by death. You know this, yes?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "And yet you came anyway." His head tilted, mirroring the wolf's gesture from moments before. "Why?" "My father is dying, I heard." Rael's expression didn't change. "The plague. It's ravaging your settlements. Has been for months." "Then you know." Lyra forced herself to meet his gaze. The blood moon rose. "It's the only cure. I just need one. That's all. One flower, and I'll leave." "Will you?" It wasn't a question. The other wolves had shifted too. 3 men now, standing at a distance, watching, waiting for orders. None of them moved to cover themselves. Modesty, apparently, wasn't a wolf concern. Rael stood, and Lyra's courage faltered. He was massive up close, intimidating in a way that had nothing to do with teeth and claws. "The blood moon rose," he said slowly, "grows only in one place. My private gardens. Guarded, warded, inaccessible to anyone without my explicit permission." Lyra's heart sank. "Then I'll do whatever you want. Work, pay. I don't care. Just, you'll die." The words were flat, final. She blinked. "What?" "You crossed the boundary. The law is clear. I kill you, or I let my pack kill you. Those are the options." He watched her face carefully, as if gauging her reaction. "Which would you prefer?" Lyra's mind raced. This couldn't be it. She hadn't come this far to die in the snow without even seeing the damn flower. "Why haven't you done it yet?" Rael's eyebrow lifted. "Excuse me?" "You said the law is clear, but I'm still breathing." She pushed herself to her feet, legs shaking but holding. "So either you're going to kill me or you're not. Which is it?" For a long moment, the Alpha King said nothing. Then, impossibly, he smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't kind. But it was something. "You're bold," he said. "Stupid, but bold." He turned to the others, gesturing sharply. "Take her to the fortress, north wing. Lock the door." Lyra's blood went cold. "Wait. You wanted the rose. I'm keeping you alive long enough to decide if you're worth the trouble." Rael's gaze pinned her in place. "Consider it a stay of execution." "I don't understand." "You don't need to." He stepped closer, and Lyra's breath caught. Up close he smelled like pine and smoke, and something feral. "You crossed into my territory. You're mine now. That's all you need to know." Before she could respond, hands grabbed her arms, firm, unyielding. The other wolves. One of them, a man with a scar splitting his eyebrow, leaned close. "Don't run," he murmured. "He hates it when they run." Then they were moving, dragging her through the snow, and Lyra twisted to look back. Rael stood where she'd left him, a dark silhouette against white trees, watching her disappear into the forest. She had the strangest feeling she'd just made a deal without knowing the terms. The fortress appeared like a wound in the mountainside. Stone, black iron, built into the rock itself, as if it had grown there over centuries. Torches burned along the walls, casting everything in shades of orange and shadow. Wolves moved through the courtyard, some human, some not, all of them stopping to stare as Lyra was hauled through the gates. She'd expected a dungeon. Instead, they took her up. The north wing was different, cleaner, quieter. The halls were lined with tapestries that looked expensive, and the room they shoved her into had a bed. An actual bed. with furs and pillows and a fireplace that was already lit. "Don't get comfortable," the scarred wolf said, unlocking her wrists. "The alpha will decide what to do with you in the morning. And if he decides to kill me?" The man's smile was all teeth. "Then you won't have to worry about being comfortable." The door slammed shut. A lock clicked. Lyra stood in the center of the room, staring at the walls, trying to process what had just happened. She'd crossed the boundary, been caught, and instead of dying, she was here, in a room, with a bed. It didn't make sense unless a horrible thought crept in, cold and unwelcome. She'd heard stories about wolves taking human prisoners, about what they did with them. Breeding, leverage, entertainment. Her stomach twisted. No, she wouldn't think like that. Not yet. She moved to the window, barred, naturally, and looked out over the fortress grounds. Snow fell steadily, covering everything in white. In the distance, she could just make out the shape of a garden. Walled, guarded. The blood moon rose was in there, somewhere, so close. Lyra pressed her forehead against the cold glass and closed her eyes. She'd come here to save her father. Nothing had changed. She just had to figure out how to survive long enough to finish what she started. She didn't sleep. When the door opened again, dawn light was creeping through the window, gray and weak. Lyra turned, expecting the scarred wolf or another guard. It was Rael. He'd dressed, leather pants, a shirt left half open, boots that looked like they'd seen a decade of use. His hair was still damp, like he'd just bathed. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, studying her with the same unsettling intensity from the night before. "You didn't eat," he said, nodding toward the tray of food someone must have brought while she wasn't paying attention. "I wasn't hungry." "Liar," Lyra bristled. "What do you want?" "To talk." Rael stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Not locked. Interesting. "You said your father is dying, the plague. How long does he have?" "I don't know, a week, maybe less. And you thought stealing from me would save him." "I didn't think I'd get caught." Rael's laugh was sharp and humorless. Clearly. He moved to the window, looking out at the same view she'd been staring at all night. "The blood moon rose is rare. Powerful. Do you know why?" Lyra shook her head. "Because it doesn't just cure. It transforms. The plague you're dealing with, it's not natural. It was created, weaponized, released into human settlements decades ago to thin your numbers." Her blood ran cold. "By who?" "Wolves who thought humans were a threat." His jaw tightened. "I stopped them, took control. But the damage was done. The rose is the only thing that reverses it, and I've kept every bloom under guard ever since." "Why?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "If you have the cure, why not distribute it? People are dying." "People are always dying." Rael turned to face her, and his expression was unreadable. "I control the cure because it's the only leverage I have to keep your kind from trying to wipe out mine. You think humans would coexist peacefully if they knew we had the answer? They'd come for it. For us. And the cycle would start again." Lyra stared at him, horrified. "So you let them die? To maintain power?" "I let some die so that more can live." He said it like it was simple, logical. "It's not kind, but it's survival." "That's monstrous." "Yes." No hesitation, no shame. "It is." The silence between them stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, Rael spoke again. "I'm going to offer you a deal." Lyra's pulse quickened. "What kind of deal?" "Your father will receive the cure. I'll send it myself. He'll live." Rael's gaze locked onto hers. "But you stay here." "For how long?" "As long as I decide." Her breath caught. "You're asking me to be your prisoner." "I'm asking you to be my guest." His smile was thin. "There's a difference." "Is there?" "You'll find out." Lyra's mind spun. This was insane. She'd come here to steal a flower, not to bargain away her freedom. But if he was telling the truth, if her father would actually be saved— "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Why not just kill me and be done with it?" Rael's expression shifted. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Because you crossed the boundary knowing you'd die, and you did it anyway. That kind of loyalty is rare. He moved closer, and Lyra fought the urge to step back. I'm curious to see what else you're capable of. And if I say no, then I kill you. Your father dies, and nothing changes. It wasn't really a choice. Lyra met his gaze, hating him, and hating herself more for what she was about to say. Fine, I'll stay. Rael's smile widened. Good. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. Oh, and Lyra, don't try to escape. The wolves who caught you last night? They're the nice ones. Then he was gone, and Lyra was left alone with the horrible certainty that she'd just stepped into a trap far more dangerous than the forest. But her father would live. That had to be enough. The days that followed were strange. Lyra was given free roam of the north wing, bedroom, sitting room, a private bathing chamber that made her Ashevale cottage look like a shack. She wasn't locked in, wasn't chained, but she also wasn't allowed to leave. Guards were always nearby, watching, waiting. She spent hours staring out the window at the walled garden, wondering if Rael had actually sent the cure or if he'd lied. There was no way to know, no way to check. On the third day, he came to her again. This time, he brought someone. This is Mira, Rael said, gesturing to the woman beside him. She was younger than Lyra, maybe 20, with auburn hair and sharp green eyes. She'll be your attendant. Lyra blinked. I don't need an attendant. You do if you want to survive here. Mira's voice was crisp, no nonsense. The Alpha's keeping you alive for now, but that doesn't mean everyone else will. Cheerful, Lyra muttered. Mira smirked. I'm realistic. There's a difference. She glanced at Rael. Anything else? No, you're dismissed. The woman left without another word, and Lyra turned to Rael. What did she mean? Not everyone will keep me alive. Exactly what it sounds like. He moved to the table, pouring himself water from a pitcher. You're human, in a fortress full of wolves. Some of them think I should have killed you on sight. Others think I'm keeping you for other reasons. Heat crept up Lyra's neck. And are you? Rael's gaze slid to her, slow and deliberate. Would it matter? She didn't answer. He chuckled, low and dark. Relax. I'm not in the habit of forcing myself on anyone. But appearances are important here. If they think you're under my protection, they'll leave you alone. If they think you're just a prisoner, he trailed off, letting the implication hang. So I'm leverage. You're an investment. He drained the cup and set it down. One I'm not ready to cash in yet. Comforting. It should be. It means you're valuable. He started toward the door, then paused. Dinner tonight. My hall. You'll attend. That wasn't a question. No, it wasn't. And then he was gone again, leaving Lyra with more questions than answers. Dinner was worse than she'd imagined. The hall was massive, filled with wolves in human form, all of them watching as she entered. Mira had dressed her in something finer than her usual clothes, dark green, practical but elegant, and Lyra felt like an imposter. Rael sat at the head of the table, and he gestured to the seat beside him. Every eye in the room followed her as she walked. She sat, kept her head up, refused to show fear. The meal started without ceremony. Food appeared, meat, bread, roasted vegetables, and conversation resumed, though Lyra could feel the weight of stares pressing against her skin. Ignore them, Rael said quietly. They're testing you. Testing what? Whether you'll break. Lyra glanced at him. And if I do? Then I'll have wasted my time. He took a drink, unconcerned. But I don't think you will. She wanted to ask why he was so sure, but movement across the table caught her attention. A man stood, tall, dark-haired, handsome in a way that felt dangerous. He raised his cup, smirking. A toast, he said, voice carrying easily over the noise. To our Alpha, who's finally found a pet. The room went silent. Rael's expression didn't change, but Lyra felt the shift in the air. Tension. Threat. Kadric, Rael said softly. Sit down. The man, Kadric, didn't move. What? It's a compliment. She's lasted 3 whole days. That's longer than the last one. Lyra's stomach dropped. The last one? Ignore him, Rael said, still calm. He's trying to provoke you. Is he lying? Rael's silence was answer enough. Kadric laughed. See? She's already figuring it out. You keep humans around until they stop being interesting. Then he mimed a throat-slitting gesture. Problem solved. Enough. The command was quiet, but it hit like a physical blow. Kadric's smile faltered. He sat, but the damage was done. Lyra looked at Rael, heart pounding. Is that true? Kadric exaggerates. That's not a denial. Rael's gaze flicked to her, and for the first time she saw something like irritation. You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I've kept humans here before, and yes, some of them died, but not because I got bored, because they tried to run, or they betrayed me, or they couldn't adapt. You're still here because you haven't done any of those things. Yet. How reassuring. It should be. He leaned closer, voice dropping. You're alive, Lyra. Your father is alive. That's more than most people in your position can say. Don't waste it on moral outrage. She wanted to argue, to rage, to throw the truth of what he was, a monster, a manipulator, a king built on corpses, in his face. But she didn't. Because he was right. She was alive. Her father was alive. And that had to be enough. For now. God. After dinner, Mira escorted her back to her room. Kadric's an asshole, the woman said bluntly. But he's not wrong. The Alpha doesn't keep people around long term. You're an anomaly. Lucky me, Lyra muttered. Mira paused at the door. For what it's worth. I think you'll last longer than the others. Why? Because you're not trying to please him. You're trying to survive him. There's a difference. She unlocked the door. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be worse. Ow. Mira's smile was grim. You'll cease. She was right. The next morning, Rael came for her before dawn. Get dressed, he said. You're coming with me. Where? Does it matter? Apparently not, because he didn't wait for an answer. Lyra dressed quickly, following him through the halls that grew colder and darker the deeper they went. Eventually, they reached a door, heavy iron, sealed with runes she didn't recognize. Rael unlocked it, and the smell hit her first. Earth, damp, growing things. He pushed the door open and Lyra stepped into the garden. The Blood Moon Rose Garden. It was smaller than she'd imagined. Enclosed, lit by strange glowing stones set into the walls. And in the center, growing from soil that looked black as night. The roses. Deep red. Almost purple. Their petals shimmered in the light, and Lyra felt her breath catch. This is it, she whispered. This is it. Rael moved to one of the plants, crouching beside it. Beautiful, isn't it? And deadly. 1 petal can cure the plague. 2 can kill you. 3 can drive you mad. Then how? Dosage. Preparation. Precision. He plucked a single petal, holding it up to the light. Your father received 2 petals, properly prepared. He should be recovering by now. Relief flooded through her, so sudden and overwhelming that her knees almost buckled. You actually sent it. I told you I would. You also told me you let people die to maintain power. Rael stood, turning to face her. I do, but I keep my deals. He tucked the petal into a pouch at his belt. You held up your end. So did I. Lyra stared at him, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the monster everyone said he was. She couldn't. Why did you bring me here? She asked finally. Because you wanted to see it. Rael moved closer, and Lyra's pulse quickened. And because I want you to understand something. What? This garden? It's the only thing standing between your kind and extinction. I control it. I control the cure. And as long as I do, I control the balance. His gaze held hers, unflinching. You hate me for it. I know. But hatred doesn't change reality. You're right, Lyra said quietly. It doesn't. Then we understand each other. No. She met his eyes, unflinching. We don't. Because you think power justifies cruelty, and I think you're just afraid of what happens if you let go. For a long moment, Rael said nothing. Then he laughed, short, sharp, surprised. You, he said, are going to be trouble. Good. His smile lingered, but something in his expression shifted. Something almost like respect. Come on, he said, before someone realizes I've brought you down here and decides to make an issue of it. They left the garden together, and as the door sealed behind them, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that something had just changed between them. She just wasn't sure what. Over the following week, Lyra began to understand the fortress. The wolves operated on hierarchy, strength, loyalty, and blood. Rael sat at the top, untouchable. Below him, the pack splintered into factions, alliances, rivalries, and Kadric was everywhere. He watched her during meals, appeared in hallways she thought were empty, always smiling, always watching. He's Rael's cousin, Mira explained one afternoon. Second in line for the throne. He's been trying to undermine the Alpha for years. Why doesn't Rael just exile him? Because exile means war, and war means wolves die. Mira's expression darkened. Rael may be a bastard, but he's not reckless. Comforting. It should be. But it wasn't, because Lyra was starting to realize that she wasn't just a prisoner here. She was a pawn, and Kadric knew it. He cornered her in the library 3 days later. You're smarter than you look, he said, leaning against a bookshelf. I'll give you that. Lyra didn't look up from the book she was pretending to read. What do you want? Conversation. Is that allowed? Depends on the conversation, Kadric chuckled. Fair. He moved closer, and Lyra forced herself not to react. You know Rael's using you, right? Obviously. And you're fine with that? I'm alive. My father's alive. That's all I care about. Is it? Kadric's tone shifted, sharper. Because from where I'm standing, you're trapped in a fortress full of predators with no way out and no allies. That doesn't sound like living. That sounds like waiting to die. Lyra finally looked up. What's your point? My point, Kadric said softly, is that Rael's not the only one with power here. And if you're smart, you'll start looking for other options. Like you? Like anyone who isn't him. Lyra studied him carefully. Handsome, charming, dangerous, just like Rael. Thanks, she said. But I'm good. Kadric's smile didn't falter. We'll see. Then he was gone, and Lyra was left with the uncomfortable certainty that she'd just been recruited into a game she didn't understand. That night, Rael summoned her, not to dinner, not to the garden, to his chambers. Lyra's heart pounded as she followed the guard through unfamiliar halls. This was different, private, intimate. The door opened, and she stepped inside. Rael stood by the window, staring out at the snow-covered mountains. He didn't turn when she entered. Close the door. She did. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Rael spoke. Kadric approached you. It wasn't a question. How did you do? Because I know him, and I know you. He turned, and his expression was unreadable. What did he say? Lyra hesitated. That I should look for other options. Did he offer to be one? Implied it. Rael's jaw tightened. And what did you say? That I wasn't interested. Why? The question caught her off guard. What? Why weren't you interested? Rael moved closer, and Lyra's breath caught. Kadric's powerful, connected. He could offer you protection, freedom, even. So why turn him down? Lyra met his gaze, refusing to look away. Because I don't trust him. And you trust me? No. The word came out sharper than she intended. But at least you're honest about what you are. Rael stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he smiled. You, he said quietly, are the most dangerous thing I've ever brought into this fortress. Is that a compliment? It's a warning. He reached out, fingers brushing her jaw, light, testing. You're here because I allow it. Don't forget that. Lyra's pulse raced, but she didn't pull away. I won't. Good. His hand dropped, and the moment shattered. Go, Rael said, before I change my mind about letting you leave. Lyra didn't need to be told twice. She left quickly, heart pounding, and didn't stop until she was back in her room with the door locked. Only then did she let herself breathe. Something was shifting between them, something dangerous and inevitable, and Lyra had no idea how to stop it. The nightmare came 3 nights later. Lyra woke gasping, sweat-soaked and shaking, the phantom sensation of claws still digging into her throat. In the dream, Rael hadn't stopped. He'd torn her apart in the snow, and she'd watched herself die from somewhere above, helpless and distant. She sat up, pressing her palms against her eyes until stars burst behind her lids. Just a dream, just a dream. But the fear lingered, cold and sticky, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't entirely fiction, that somewhere in this fortress, that version of events was still possible. A knock at the door made her flinch. "It's me," Mira's voice, muffled through the wood. "You decent?" Lyra pulled on a robe. "Yeah." Mira entered carrying a tray, tea, bread, something that smelled like honey. She set it down without comment, eyeing Lyra with the kind of scrutiny that made her uncomfortable. "Bad night? Does it show?" "You look like hell." Mira poured the tea, sliding a cup across the table. "Drink? It'll help." Lyra obeyed, mostly because arguing felt like too much effort. The tea was hot and bitter, cutting through the fog in her head. "What time is it?" "Early. The Alpha wants to see you." "Of course he did." "When?" "Now." Lyra's hands tightened around the cup. "He always this demanding?" "Always." Mira's expression softened slightly. "Look, I know this isn't what you signed up for, but if you want to survive here, you need to stop thinking like a prisoner and start thinking like a player." "I'm not playing anything." "That's the problem." Mira stood, brushing crumbs from her hands. "Everyone here is playing. Power, loyalty, survival, it's all a game. And you're a piece on the board whether you like it or not. So figure out your move, or someone else will move you." She left before Lyra could respond. Rael was waiting in the training yard. Lyra had avoided this part of the fortress so far. Too public, too exposed. But Mira had led her straight through the gates into a courtyard ringed with wolves in various states of combat. Sparring, grappling, shifting mid-fight, and slamming back into human form with bone-rattling force. It was brutal, efficient, beautiful in a way that made Lyra's stomach turn. Rael stood at the center, shirtless despite the cold, watching 2 wolves circle each other. His attention shifted when Lyra approached, and he gestured for her to join him. "You're late." "I wasn't aware we had an appointment." "We didn't. I'm making one now." He handed her a wooden staff, worn smooth from use. "Hold this." Lyra stared at it. "Why?" "Because I'm going to teach you how not to die." Her pulse spiked. "What?" "You heard me." Rael moved into a fighter's stance, loose and ready. "You're human, weak, slow. In a fortress full of predators, that makes you a target. So either you learn to defend yourself, or you end up as entertainment." "I thought I was under your protection." "You are, but protection only goes so far." He tilted his head, studying her. "What happens if I'm not here? If someone decides to test whether I'll actually retaliate? You want to bet your life on my mood?" Lyra's grip tightened on the staff. "This is insane. This is survival. Now move." He lunged. Lyra barely got the staff up in time, the impact jarring her arms. Rael didn't let up. He struck again, fast and precise, forcing her to stumble backward. She tried to counter, swinging wild, and he caught the staff mid-arc, twisting it out of her hands like she was a child. It clattered to the ground. "Pathetic," Rael said. "Again." "I don't—" "Again." Lyra picked up the staff, heart pounding, and this time when he came at her, she was ready. Sort of. She blocked the first strike, deflected the second, but the third caught her across the ribs and drove the air from her lungs. She hit the ground hard. "Better," Rael said, not unkindly. "You're thinking. Now get up." "I can't." "Yes, you can." Lyra forced herself to her feet, ribs screaming, and faced him again. They went 6 more rounds. She lost every single one. By the end, she was bleeding from a split lip, her hands blistered, her body one massive bruise. But she was still standing. Rael lowered his staff, and something like approval flickered across his face. "You're tougher than you look." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." He handed her a cloth to wipe the blood from her mouth. "Same time tomorrow." "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" He didn't. Lyra took the cloth, pressing it against her lip. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I need you functional." Rael's gaze swept over her, clinical. And because if you're going to stay here, you need to prove you're worth the trouble. I thought I already did. That was day one. This is the rest of your life. He stepped closer, voice dropping. You want to survive, Lyra? Stop waiting for me to save you. Save yourself. Then he walked away, leaving her standing in the middle of the yard, aching and furious and strangely alive. The whispers started that afternoon. Lyra noticed them first in the hall, wolves stopping mid-conversation when she passed, eyes tracking her with something between curiosity and disdain. By dinner, the entire fortress seemed to know. The human was training. She sat beside Rael as usual, ignoring the stares, but the tension was palpable. Across the table, Kadric watched her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I heard you took a beating today, he said casually. How's that working out for you? Better than expected, Lyra replied, not looking up from her plate. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like desperation. Kadric, Rael's voice was soft, dangerous. Drop it. I'm just saying, if she's that worried about survival, maybe she picked the wrong protector. The table went silent. Rael set down his cup with deliberate care. You have something to say to me, cousin? Say it. Kadric's smile widened. Just making conversation. Then make it elsewhere. For a moment, Lyra thought Kadric would push. Challenge. But then he stood, inclining his head in mock deference, and walked away. The tension didn't ease. He's going to be a problem, Lyra said quietly. He's always a problem. Rael's tone was flat. Ignore him. Hard to ignore someone who keeps implying I'm going to die. Then prove him wrong. Lyra met his gaze, searching for something, reassurance maybe, or at least acknowledgement that this was harder than it looked. But Rael's expression was unreadable, and after a moment, she looked away. Olcham. The second week brought new horrors. Mira took her deeper into the fortress, through sections Lyra hadn't seen. Storage, armory, dungeons. The dungeons were worse than she'd imagined. Cold, dark, stinking of old blood and something fouler. Mira led her past cells occupied by wolves, rogues, traitors, prisoners of war. They snarled as she passed, throwing themselves against the bars with enough force to rattle the stone. This is where you'd be, Mira said, if the Alpha hadn't decided you were interesting. Lyra stared at the closest cell. A man, maybe, though it was hard to tell. His eyes glowed amber in the darkness, feral and hungry. What did he do? Tried to kill Rael. Mira's voice was matter-of-fact. Failed, obviously. Now he rots. How long has he been here? 3 years. Lyra's stomach turned. That's justice. Wolf justice. Mira turned to face her. You need to understand something. Rael may seem controlled, but he's still a predator. And predators don't forgive betrayal. Ever. Why are you telling me this? Because I like you. Mira's smile was sad. And I don't want to watch you end up down here. They left the dungeons in silence, but the images stayed with Lyra long after. Eyes in the dark, claws scraping stone, the smell of despair so thick it clung to her skin. That night, she barely slept. Training continued. Every morning, Rael dragged her into the yard and beat the weakness out of her piece by piece. She learned to block, to dodge, to read his movements before he made them. She also learned to hate him, not for the bruises, those were expected, but for the way he pushed, relentless and unforgiving, never offering comfort or praise, just corrections, adjustments, the clinical dissection of every mistake. You're dropping your shoulder. Your grip's too tight. You're thinking too much. React. By the third week, Lyra could hold her own for almost a full minute before he disarmed her. It felt like progress. It felt like nothing. Better, Rael said after one particularly brutal session. You might actually survive an ambush now. That's the goal, right? Survival. Always. He tossed her a water skin and she drank greedily. You're learning faster than I expected. Should I be flattered? You should be cautious. Rael's expression darkened. The faster you improve, the more attention you'll draw, and not all of it will be friendly. You mean Kadric? Among others. He glanced across the yard, where a cluster of wolves watched them with undisguised hostility. You're an outsider, a human. The fact that I'm training you personally is controversial. Then why do it? Rael's gaze snapped back to her, sharp and assessing. Because you asked me to save yourself, and I'm curious to see if you can. Before she could respond, one of the watching wolves stepped forward, a woman, tall and scarred, with pale hair pulled back in a brutal knot. She moved like violence waiting to happen. Alpha, she said, voice cold. A word. Rael's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Lyra, go. But now. Lyra left, but not before catching the woman's eyes. There was no curiosity there, no interest, just hatred. She found out who the woman was that night. That's Senna, Mira said, dropping into the chair across from Lyra. Beta, second in command, and she hates you. I gathered. No, you don't understand. She hates you. Like, would gut you in your sleep given half a chance. Lyra's stomach sank. Why? Because Rael chose you. Mira leaned forward, voice dropping. Senna's been his right hand for a decade. She's loyal, ruthless, and completely in love with him. Always has been. And now you show up, and suddenly she's not the only woman he's paying attention to. He's not... Lyra stopped, because she wasn't sure how to finish that sentence. It's not like that. Doesn't matter what it is, matters what it looks like. Mira's expression turned grim. And it looks like your competition, which makes you a threat. I'm not trying to compete. Then you're the only one who thinks that. Lyra buried her face in her hands. This was getting worse by the day. She'd come here to save her father, and somehow she'd ended up in the middle of a power struggle she didn't understand and couldn't escape. What do I do? She asked finally. Stay away from her. Don't give her an excuse. Mira hesitated. And for what it's worth, watch your back. Senna's not the only one who sees you as a problem. The attack came 2 nights later. Lyra was alone in her room, half asleep, when the door burst open. She barely had time to register the shape lunging at her before claws raked across her arm, tearing fabric and skin. She screamed. The wolf, a young male, eyes wild with bloodlust, pinned her against the wall, teeth snapping inches from her throat. Lyra grabbed the closest thing, a candlestick, and slammed it into his skull. He howled, releasing her, and she bolted for the door. She didn't make it. He tackled her from behind, and they hit the floor hard. Lyra's vision blurred, pain exploding through her ribs. The wolf shifted above her, human now, fist raised to strike. And then he was gone. Rael stood over her, the wolf's body crumpled against the far wall, unmoving. Blood dripped from Rael's claws, and his eyes were pure amber, no trace of humanity left. Lyra. His voice was rough, strained. Are you hurt? She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. He crouched beside her, hands surprisingly gentle as he checked her wounds. The gash on her arm was deep, but not fatal. Her ribs were bruised, maybe cracked. You'll live, he said, and the relief in his voice was almost human. Who? One of Senna's pack, young, stupid. Rael's expression darkened. She'll answer for this. You don't know she sent him. I know. He stood, offering his hand. Come on. You're not staying here tonight. Where? My chambers. Where I can keep you safe. Lyra's pulse spiked. It's not a suggestion. Rael's gaze locked onto hers, unyielding. Someone just tried to kill you in your sleep. Until I find out who ordered it, you're staying where I can see you. She wanted to argue, to insist she was fine, that she didn't need his protection. But her arm was bleeding through the makeshift bandage. Her ribs screamed with every breath, and the wolf's body lay 5 feet away as a reminder of how close she'd come to dying. So she took his hand. Rael's chambers were larger than hers, darker, sparse, with minimal decoration, just a bed, a desk cluttered with maps and papers and weapons mounted on the walls like art. He settled her onto a chair near the fire, retrieving a medical kit from somewhere. This is gonna hurt, he said, kneeling in front of her. Everything hurts. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Then he started cleaning the wound, and Lyra bit down hard to keep from crying out. The alcohol burned like fire, but Rael worked quickly, stitching the gash with steady hands. You did well, he said quietly, fighting back, Most people freeze. I'm not most people. No. His eyes flicked up to hers. You're not. The silence between them felt heavy, charged. Lyra broke it first. Who was he? Garrett, 19, just made his first shift last year. Rael tied off the stitches, his jaw tight. Senna's been grooming him since he was a pup, loyal to a fault. You think she ordered the hit? I know she did, but proving it is another matter. He sat back, studying her. You could leave, you know. I'd send you home. Give you enough coin to disappear. Lyra blinked. What? You didn't sign up for assassination attempts. This is worse than I expected. Rael's expression was unreadable. If you want out, now's the time. For a moment, Lyra considered it, really considered it. Her father was safe. She'd done what she came for. Walking away now would be smart, logical. But something stopped her. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was stubbornness, or maybe it was the way Rael looked at her, like she was something more than just a liability. I'm not leaving, she said finally. Why? Because running away won't fix this. It'll just prove everyone right. She met his gaze, unflinching. I'm not weak, and I'm not going to let Senna or anyone else decide when I'm done. Rael stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he smiled. You, he said, are going to get yourself killed. Probably. And you don't care. Not really. His laugh was low and rough, and something about it made Lyra's chest tighten. All right. Then we do this the hard way. What's the hard way? You stay. I deal with Senna, and we see who blinks first. Lyra nodded, though her heart was racing. Okay. Okay. Rael stood, offering his hand again. Come on, you're taking the bed. Where will you? The floor. I've slept in worse places. He guided her toward the bed, and Lyra didn't have the energy to argue. She collapsed onto the furs, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Rael settling near the fire, back against the wall, eyes on the door, watching, waiting, keeping her safe. Morning came too fast. Lyra woke to voices, low, angry, coming from outside the door. She sat up, wincing as her ribs protested, and listened. Your decision, not hers, Senna's voice, sharp as broken glass. You're making us look weak. I'm making us look controlled. Rael, calm but firm. There's a difference. She's human. She doesn't belong here. She's under my protection. That makes her pack. Pack? Senna's laugh was bitter. You're delusional. She's a pet, Rael. And the moment she stops being useful, she'll turn on you, just like the others. The others didn't survive an assassination attempt and choose to stay. Silence. Then, you're defending her. I'm stating facts. No, you're protecting her, which means you care, and that's a problem. The only problem, Rael said, voice dropping to something dangerous, is you're forgetting your place. Garrett attacked her on your orders. Don't insult me by denying it. He acted alone. Liar. The word landed like a blow. More silence, then footsteps, retreating. Lyra exhaled slowly, heart pounding. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but now she couldn't unhear it. Rael cared. Not much. Not openly, but enough to defend her against his own beta. The door opened and Rael stepped inside, his expression unreadable. You're awake. I heard. Good. Then you know where you stand. He moved to the desk, sorting through papers. Senna's contained, for now, but she's not going to stop. What do we do? We? He glanced at her, one eyebrow raised. There's no we. I handle her. You stay alive. That's it? That's everything. Rael's gaze softened slightly. You've done enough, Lyra. Let me do the rest. She wanted to argue, to insist she could help, that she wasn't helpless, but the truth was she was out of her depth. This was his world, not hers. So she nodded. Okay. Rael studied her for a moment longer, then returned to his work, and Lyra sat there, wondering when staying alive had become so complicated. But 3 days passed. Lyra moved back to her room, though Rael stationed guards outside. 2 wolves, rotating shifts, who watched her with equal parts curiosity and suspicion. Training continued. Harder now. Faster. Rael pushed her until she couldn't stand, then pushed further, and slowly, painfully, she began to improve. On the fourth day, she managed to land a hit. It wasn't much, just a glancing blow to Rael's ribs, but the shock on his face was worth every bruise she'd earned. "Lucky shot," he said, grinning. "Skill," Lyra corrected. "We'll see." They went another round, and this time she lasted 3 full minutes before he disarmed her. Progress. That night, Kadric found her in the hall. "You're getting better," he said, falling into step beside her. "I'm impressed." "Don't be. I'm still terrible." "Terrible compared to Rael, maybe, but compared to most humans?" Kadric's smile was sharp. "You're a threat." "I'm not trying to be a threat. That's what makes you dangerous." He stopped, turning to face her. "You know he's going to get you killed, right?" Lyra's stomach tightened. "Excuse me?" "Rael. He keeps you close because you're useful, but the moment that changes, you're done." Kadric stepped closer, voice dropping. "I'm offering you a way out, before it's too late." "I told you before." "I know what you told me. But things have changed. Senna's gunning for you. The pack's divided. And Rael's too proud to see that keeping you here is tearing everything apart." His gaze held hers, intense. "Come with me. I'll get you out. Keep you safe, no strings." "Why?" Lyra asked bluntly. "What do you get out of this?" Kadric's smile returned. "Let's just say I have my reasons." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." Lyra studied him. Handsome, charming, dangerous. Just like Rael had said, but different. Rael was a storm. Controlled but destructive. Kadric was a snake. Smooth, patient, waiting for the right moment to strike. "I'm not leaving," she said finally. "You will." Kadric's tone was certain. "Eventually, you'll realize Rael can't protect you. And when that happens, I'll be waiting." Then he walked away, and Lyra was left standing in the empty hall, heart pounding. She didn't trust Kadric, but she wasn't sure she trusted Rael either, and that terrified her more than anything. The breaking point came 2 nights later. Lyra was in the library, her refuge, the one place in the fortress where she felt almost safe, when the door slammed open. Rael stormed in, fury radiating off him in waves. "Get up!" he snapped. Lyra stood quickly. "What's wrong?" "Senna challenged me. Publicly. In front of the entire pack." His eyes burned amber. "She's calling for a tribunal, wants you exiled." Lyra's blood went cold. "Can she do that?" "She can try." Rael's jaw clenched. "But tribunals require a vote, and right now, I don't have the numbers." "What does that mean?" "It means if I lose, you're out, banished, and if you step foot in wolf territory again, it's a death sentence." The room spun. Lyra grabbed the back of a chair for support. "So, what do we do?" "We fight." Rael's gaze locked onto hers. "Tomorrow night. Public tribunal. I'll defend your right to stay, but you need to defend yourself." "How?" "By proving you're worth keeping." He moved closer, voice dropping. "The pack respects strength, loyalty, sacrifice. Show them you have all 3, and they'll vote in your favor. Fail, and you're done." Lyra's hand shook. "I don't know if I can—" "Yes, you can." Rael's hands gripped her shoulders, steadying her. "You've survived this long. One more night. That's all I'm asking." "And if I fail?" "Then I'll make sure you get home safe." His expression softened, just barely. "But you won't fail. I know you won't." Lyra wanted to believe him. But fear had its claws in deep, and she couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow night everything was going to fall apart. The tribunal was held in the Great Hall. Every wolf in the fortress attended, hundreds of them, packed into the space, filling it with noise and heat and tension so thick Lyra could barely breathe. She stood at the center, flanked by Rael on one side and Mira on the other. Across from her, Senna waited, flanked by her own supporters. The Alpha's throne sat empty. This wasn't about leadership. This was about justice. A massive wolf, gray-furred, scarred, stepped forward. The Arbiter. "We're here," he said, voice carrying over the crowd, "to decide the fate of Lyra Hale. Human, trespasser, guest of the Alpha." His gaze swept the room. "Senna of the Red Fang has called for exile. Ryle Thorne has called for acceptance. The pack will decide. Senna stepped forward first. This human, she said, voice dripping with contempt, crossed our borders, stole from us, and now lives among us like she belongs. She's weak, fragile, a liability. Her gaze cut to Rael, and the Alpha has allowed sentiment to cloud his judgment. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. We are wolves, Senna continued, predators. We do not coddle prey, and we do not allow outsiders to corrupt our strength. She turned back to Lyra. Exile her, before her presence destroys us. The hall erupted in noise, shouts, howls, arguments. The Arbiter raised a hand. Rael Thorne, speak. Rael stepped forward, and the room quieted. Lyra Hale crossed our borders to save her father's life, he said, voice steady. She was caught. She could have begged for mercy. Instead, she negotiated. She stayed. She trained. And when someone tried to kill her, she fought back. His gaze swept the crowd. That's not weakness. That's strength. She's human, someone shouted. She's pack, Rael shot back. By my word, by my protection. And anyone who challenges that challenges me. The threat hung in the air, sharp and clear. The Arbiter turned to Lyra. Do you have anything to say? Lyra's throat went dry. Every eye in the room was on her, judging, waiting. She stepped forward. I'm not asking for your pity, she said, voice shaking but loud. I know I'm human. I know I don't belong here, but I'm not weak, and I'm not a liability. She met Senna's glare head on. I survived your assassin. I've trained every day, and I've earned the right to be here. You've earned nothing, Senna spat. Then test me. The words came out before Lyra could stop them. Right now. Whatever you want. I'll prove I belong. The hall went silent. Senna's smile was slow, cruel. Careful what you offer, human. The Arbiter's eyes narrowed. Senna, what do you propose? A trial by combat. Senna's gaze never left Lyra. Her against one of mine. No weapons. No mercy. If she wins, she stays. If she loses... The smile widened. Exile. Permanent. Rael's hand shot out, gripping Lyra's arm. No, absolutely not. It's her choice, the Arbiter said. Lyra Hale, do you accept? Lyra looked at Rael, saw the fear in his eyes, the certainty that she'd lose. Then she looked at Senna, saw the confidence, the expectation of victory, and something inside Lyra snapped. She was so damn tired of being underestimated. I accept, she said. The hall exploded. Rael's grip on her arm tightened until it hurt. Are you out of your mind? He hissed, low enough that only she could hear. You'll be torn apart. Maybe. Lyra pulled free, heart hammering but voice steady. Or maybe I'll prove everyone wrong. This isn't training. This is real. His eyes searched hers, desperate. They'll send their best. Someone twice your size with 10 times your experience. You can't win. Then I'll lose trying. She met his gaze without flinching. You said I needed to prove I belong. This is how. Rael opened his mouth to argue, but the Arbiter's voice cut through the noise. The challenge is accepted. Senna, name your champion. Senna's smile was all teeth. She turned, scanning her pack, and Lyra's stomach dropped when she saw who stepped forward. Not Garrett. Not some young wolf looking to prove himself. It was a woman. Older, maybe 40, with iron gray hair and a scar that split her face from temple to jaw. She moved like a predator, all coiled muscle and barely contained violence. This is Kira, Senna announced. My second. 20 years of combat experience. Undefeated in single combat. The crowd roared approval. Lyra's mouth went dry. Rael leaned close, his voice barely audible. If it goes bad, yield. Immediately. Pride isn't worth your life. I know. Do you? His hand found hers, squeezing once. Because you have a bad habit of not knowing when to quit. Lyra almost smiled. I learned from the best. The Arbiter gestured to the center of the hall, where the crowd had pulled back to form a rough circle. Combatants, take your positions. Lyra stepped forward, legs shaking but holding. Across from her, Kira rolled her shoulders, cracking her neck with casual indifference. Nothing personal, human, Kira said. But you shouldn't have come here. Yeah, I've heard. The Arbiter raised his hand. Rules are simple. No weapons, no killing. First to yield or fall unconscious loses. His gaze swept between them. Understood? Lyra nodded. Kira just smiled. Begin. Kira moved first. She was fast, faster than Lyra expected, closing the distance in 3 strides. Lyra barely dodged the first strike, a fist that would have caved in her ribs. She stumbled back, trying to find her footing, but Kira was already on her. A knee to the stomach drove the air from Lyra's lungs. She doubled over, gasping, and Kira's elbow caught her across the jaw, snapping her head sideways. Pain exploded through her skull. The crowd roared. Lyra hit the ground, tasting blood, her vision swimming. Somewhere distant, she heard Rael shouting, but the words didn't register. Get up! Get up! She forced herself to her knees just as Kira's boot swung toward her face. Lyra threw herself sideways, rolling, and came up in a crouch. Kira laughed. You're tougher than you look. I'll give you that. Lyra spat blood. Thanks. They circled each other, and Lyra's mind raced. Kira was bigger, stronger, more experienced. Fighting her head-on was suicide. So don't fight fair. Rael's voice echoed in her head from weeks of training. Use their strength against them. Make them overcommit. Kira lunged again, and this time Lyra didn't dodge. She stepped into the attack, taking a glancing blow to the shoulder, and drove her knee into Kira's thigh, right where Rael had taught her the muscle was weakest. Kira grunted, stumbling, and Lyra pressed the advantage. She swept Kira's leg, using momentum to bring the larger woman down. They hit the ground together, grappling, and for a moment Lyra had the upper hand. Then Kira shifted, bones cracked, fur erupted, and suddenly Lyra wasn't fighting a woman anymore. She was fighting a wolf. The crowd's roar turned deafening. No! Rael's voice, sharp with fury. She can't shift. That's against the rules. No killing was the rule, Senna called back, voice smug. Shifting wasn't mentioned. The Arbiter hesitated, and Lyra knew with cold certainty that he wasn't going to intervene. Kira's jaws snapped inches from her throat. Lyra rolled, scrambling away, but the wolf was faster. Claws raked across her back, tearing fabric and skin. She screamed, pain white-hot, and hit the ground hard. The wolf circled, growling low, and Lyra's vision blurred. This was it. She was going to die. And then rage, not fear, not desperation, pure incandescent rage. She'd crossed a forbidden border to save her father, survived assassination attempts, trained until her body broke. And now some wolf bitch was going to kill her because Senna wanted to prove a point? No. Lyra grabbed a piece of broken wood from the floor, part of a chair, splintered and sharp. And when Kira lunged, she didn't dodge. She drove the makeshift stake into the wolf's shoulder. Kira howled, jerking back, and the shift reversed. Human again, blood pouring from the wound, she staggered. Lyra didn't give her time to recover. She tackled Kira, driving her into the ground, and pressed the bloody stake against her throat. Yield, Lyra gasped, or I end this. Kira's eyes widened. For the first time, there was fear there. The hall had gone silent. Yield, Lyra repeated, voice shaking. Kira's jaw clenched. Then quietly, I yield. The Arbiter's voice rang out. The human wins. Lyra collapsed, the stake falling from her hands, and somewhere in the chaos, Rael was there, pulling her up, holding her steady. You insane, brilliant idiot, he muttered, half laughing, half furious. Lyra managed a weak smile. Told you I'd prove it. Then the world tilted, and everything went black. She woke in Rael's chambers again. Pain hit first. Her back, her ribs, her jaw. Everything hurt, but she was alive. Mira sat beside the bed, wrapping fresh bandages around Lyra's torso. You're awake. Good. Means you're not dying. Feels like I'm dying. You'll live. Mira's expression was unreadable. You won, by the way, in case you forgot. I remember. Lyra winced as Mira pulled the bandage tight. Where's Rael? Dealing with Senna. She's claiming the fight was invalid because you used a weapon. It was a piece of wood. Doesn't matter to her? Mira tied off the bandage. But the Arbiter already ruled. You won. Fair and square. Senna's just pissed. Good. Lyra tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. How bad is it? 4 broken ribs, deep lacerations on your back, concussion, dislocated shoulder that we already set. Mira's tone was clinical. You'll be bedridden for a week, maybe 2. I don't have 2 weeks. You don't have a choice. The door opened and Rael entered, looking exhausted. His gaze went straight to Lyra, and something in his expression softened. You're awake. So I'm told. He moved to the bed, sitting on the edge. That was the stupidest, most reckless thing you've ever done. You're welcome. Rael's laugh was rough. I'm serious. You could have died. But I didn't. Lyra met his gaze. I won. You survived. There's a difference. He reached out, fingers brushing a bruise on her jaw with surprising gentleness. The pack voted. You're officially recognized. You have the right to stay. Relief flooded through her. So it's over. For now. Rael's expression darkened. But Senna's not done, and neither is Kadric. What do you mean? Kadric's been quiet. Too quiet. He's planning something, I just don't know what. Rael stood, pacing. And Senna's influence is stronger than I thought. Half the pack sided with her during the vote. But we won. Barely. He turned to face her. This isn't over, Lyra. It's just beginning. Before she could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Rael opened it, and a young wolf entered, a messenger, out of breath. Alpha, you need to come, now. What's wrong? It's the garden. Someone's broken in. Rael's face went pale. What? The Blood Moon Rose Garden. The wards are shattered. Half the plants are gone. Lyra's blood ran cold. Rael was already moving. Lock this room. No one in or out. He glanced back at Lyra. Stay here. Then he was gone, and Lyra was left staring at Mira, whose expression had turned grim. This is bad, Mira said quietly. How bad? The kind of bad that starts wars. Rael didn't return until dawn. When he finally entered, he looked like he'd aged a decade. His clothes were dirty, his hands blood-stained, and his eyes were hollow. They took everything, he said, voice flat. Every bloom, every root. The entire garden is destroyed. Lyra's stomach dropped. Who? I don't know. The wards were broken from the inside, which means someone in the fortress did this. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Whoever it was knew exactly what they were doing. Can you grow more? It takes years, decades even, and without the original plants... He trailed off, and Lyra understood. The cure was gone. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now? Rael's laugh was bitter. Now every human settlement that was relying on me to save them is going to die, and every wolf who thinks I'm weak for keeping you alive is going to use this as proof. This isn't my fault, isn't it? He looked at her, and the pain in his eyes was almost unbearable. You came here for the rose. Maybe you weren't the only one. The accusation hit like a physical blow. You think I did this? I don't know what to think. Rael stood, moving to the window. All I know is that the moment you arrived, everything started falling apart. Rael, just don't. Not right now. He didn't turn around. I need to think. Lyra wanted to argue, to defend herself. But the weight of his suspicion was crushing, and she didn't have the energy to fight, so she stayed silent. By midday, the entire fortress knew. Whispers followed Lyra everywhere. Accusations, suspicions, outright hostility. She'd won the tribunal, but now she was blamed for something far worse. Mira tried to shield her, but even she looked uncertain. Did you know? Mira asked quietly. About the garden? No. Lyra's voice was sharp. I didn't know, and I didn't do it. Then who did? I don't know. But even as she said it, a thought crept in, cold and unwelcome. Kadric. He'd been too quiet, too patient, and he told her once that he had his reasons for wanting her out. What if this was his move? She found him in the armory, sharpening a blade with casual precision. Lyra. He didn't look up. Heard about the garden. Tragic. You did this. Now he looked at her, eyebrows raised. That's a bold accusation. You wanted Rael weakened. You wanted me gone. This accomplishes both. Kadric set down the blade, standing slowly. You give me too much credit. I'm ambitious, not stupid. Destroying the garden doesn't benefit me. It benefits no one. Then who? That, Kadric said, voice soft, is the question, isn't it? He stepped closer, and Lyra fought the urge to back away. But I'll tell you this. Whoever did it, they're a genius. Because now Rael has no leverage, no cure, no power. His smile was sharp. And when he falls, someone's going to have to take his place. It won't be you. Won't it? He tilted his head. You've been here long enough to see how this works. Strength rules. And Rael just lost his greatest strength. He moved past her, pausing at the door. Enjoy the chaos, Lyra. It's only going to get worse. He was right. Within days, reports came in. Human settlements were panicking. Without the cure, the plague was spreading unchecked. Desperation turned to anger, and anger turned to action. A militia formed, armed humans demanding access to the fortress, demanding the cure. Rael refused. I don't have it, he told them through a messenger. It's gone. They didn't believe him. The first attack came 3 nights later, a raid on the southern border, 5 wolves dead. The humans retreated, but the message was clear. If Rael wouldn't give them the cure, they'd take it by force. The fortress descended into chaos. Wolves demanded retaliation, blood for blood, but Rael hesitated, and that hesitation cost him. Senna called another tribunal. The Alpha has failed us, she declared, standing before the assembled pack. He allowed a human to infiltrate our home. He lost the cure. And now our people are dying because of his weakness. The crowd murmured agreement. I call for a challenge, Senna continued. Leadership, Alpha against Alpha. Winner takes control. Rael stood slowly, his expression unreadable. You're challenging me? No. Senna stepped aside, and Lyra's heart stopped. Kadric stepped forward. I am, he said, voice carrying. By right of blood. By right of strength. I challenge you, Rael Thorn, for leadership of this pack. The hall erupted. Rael's jaw clenched, but he didn't look surprised. When? Tomorrow night, full moon. Traditional rules. To the death? Kadric's smile was cold. Unless you'd prefer to yield now. Rael's eyes flashed amber. See you tomorrow, cousin. Lyra found Rael in his chambers, alone, staring at the maps on his desk. You can't fight him, she said. I don't have a choice. Yes, you do. Walk away. Let him have it. Rael looked at her like she'd lost her mind. And go where? I'm Alpha. This is who I am. You're going to die. Maybe. He turned back to the maps. But I'll die fighting. Lyra wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him see reason. But she knew that look, that stubborn, self-destructive determination. She'd seen it in the mirror often enough. There has to be another way, she said quietly. There isn't. Rael's voice was flat. Kadric's been planning this for years. He's stronger than me, faster, and he's hungry in a way I'm not anymore. He finally looked at her. I'm going to lose. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He crossed the room, stopping in front of her. And when I do, you need to run, as fast and as far as you can, because Kadric won't let you live. Rael, promise me. His hands gripped her shoulders. Promise me you'll run. Lyra's throat tightened. I can't. Why not? Because I care about you, she almost said. Because somewhere between the threats and the training and the impossible choices, you became something I can't walk away from. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she said, because I'm not a coward. Rael's expression cracked, just slightly. Then he pulled her into a fierce embrace, holding her like she was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. You should be, he murmured against her hair. It's safer. Safe is boring. His laugh was broken. You're going to be the death of me. Not if Kadric gets there first. Rael pulled back, and the look in his eyes made her chest ache. If I don't make it, don't. Lyra, don't. She pressed her fingers against his mouth. You're going to win, because you're too stubborn to lose, and because I'm not losing you, not now, Not like this. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then Rael kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and fierce and full of everything they hadn't said. Lyra kissed him back, pouring every ounce of fear and hope and frustration into it, and when they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. That, Rael said, voice rough, was a terrible idea. Probably. If I survive tomorrow, we're going to talk about this. Deal. He kissed her once more, softer this time, then stepped back. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hell. Aren't they all? He almost smiled. But Lyra didn't sleep. She spent the night pacing, thinking, trying to find a solution that didn't end with Rael dead. And then, just before dawn, it hit her. The cure wasn't gone. Kadric had said it himself. Destroying the garden didn't benefit him, which meant someone else had taken it. Someone who knew how to break the wards, someone with access to the fortress. Someone close to Rael. Lyra's mind raced, pieces clicking into place. Senna had called for Kadric's challenge. Senna had tried to have Lyra killed. Senna had the most to gain from Rael's downfall. What if she'd taken the cure, not to destroy it, but to leverage it? To force Rael into a position where he had no power, no support, no choice but to fall. And if Lyra could prove it, if she could find the cure, she could stop the challenge. She grabbed her cloak and slipped out of the room, moving through the dark halls with purpose. She didn't know where Senna would hide it, but she knew where to start: the dungeons. The dungeons were darker at night, lit only by scattered torches that cast long, flickering shadows. Lyra moved carefully, every nerve on edge, until she reached the section reserved for storage. Most of the cells here were empty, but one at the end had a new lock. Fresh, expensive. Lyra's pulse quickened. She pulled a thin piece of metal from her pocket, a lockpick Mira had given her weeks ago just in case, and worked the mechanism. It took longer than she'd hoped, her hands shaking, but finally the lock clicked open. Inside, hidden beneath a cloth, were the missing blood moon roses. All of them. Lyra's breath caught. She'd been right. Footsteps echoed behind her and Lyra spun. Senna stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Well, she said softly, this is inconvenient. Lyra's hand went to the knife at her belt. You stole the cure. Borrowed. Senna stepped into the cell. There's a difference. You framed me. You tried to destroy Rael. I tried to save the pack. Senna's voice was cold. Rael's too weak to lead. Too sentimental. He keeps you alive, lets humans dictate policy, and now our people are suffering because of it. So you stole the only thing that could save them? I took it so he'd have no choice but to step down. Senna's gaze hardened. But you had to interfere, just like you always do. I'm taking this to Rael. No, Senna said. You're not. She shifted, and Lyra realized too late that she was trapped. The wolf lunged, and Lyra barely got the knife up in time. It grazed Senna's shoulder, drawing blood, but did nothing to slow her. Claws raked across Lyra's arm, and she stumbled back, slamming into the wall. Senna's jaws snapped inches from her throat, and Lyra drove her knee into the wolf's ribs with everything she had. Senna yelped, jerking back, and Lyra ran. She burst out of the cell, sprinting through the dungeon, Senna's snarls echoing behind her. Her lungs burned, her injured arm screaming, but she didn't stop. She had to reach Rael. She had to tell him the truth. But as she rounded the corner, another wolf stepped into her path. Kira. And behind her, 3 more. Lyra skidded to a stop, trapped. Senna emerged from the darkness, shifting back to human form, blood dripping from her shoulder. You should have stayed in your room, she said. Lyra raised the knife, even though she knew it was useless. Rael will find out. He'll know what you did. By then it won't matter. Senna's smile was cold. Kadric will be Alpha, and you'll be dead. The wolves closed in, and Lyra knew with absolute certainty that she wasn't walking out of this, but she'd die fighting, just like Rael taught her. She lunged at Senna, knife flashing, and the dungeon erupted into chaos. The knife found flesh before claws found her. Lyra buried the blade in Senna's thigh, twisting hard, and the beta's scream echoed off stone walls. Senna stumbled backward, and Lyra used the momentum to dive between 2 of the advancing wolves, rolling across the filthy dungeon floor. She came up running. Behind her, Senna's voice cut through the chaos. "Don't kill her! I want her alive!" That was somehow worse. Lyra's lungs burned as she sprinted through the maze of corridors, the sound of pursuit thundering behind her. She had no plan, no weapon except the blood-slicked knife, and 4 wolves on her heels who could tear her apart the moment they caught up. She burst through a door into a storage room, barrels, crates, nowhere to hide. Dead end. No, not dead end. Up. Lyra grabbed a crate, hauling herself onto a stack of barrels, then up to a narrow ledge that ran along the ceiling. Support beams. Old, probably rotten, but better than nothing. The wolves crashed through the door seconds later. Senna limped in last, blood streaming down her leg, eyes blazing with fury. "Find her!" They spread out, sniffing, searching. Lyra pressed herself flat against the beam, trying not to breathe, trying not to exist. Kira's voice drifted up. "She's here. I can smell the fear." "Then flush her out," Senna snapped. One of the younger wolves shifted back to human, a man with a cruel smile, and started climbing. Lyra's heart hammered. The beam wouldn't support both their weights. She knew that with absolute certainty. So when he reached for her, she didn't pull back. She kicked him in the face. He fell, crashing into the barrels below with a sickening crunch. The other wolves snarled, but Lyra was already moving, scrambling across the beams toward a ventilation shaft she'd spotted in the corner. Too small for wolves, maybe small enough for her. She reached it just as Kira leaped, jaws snapping at her ankles. Lyra threw herself into the shaft, metal scraping her shoulders, and crawled. Behind her, Senna's voice echoed. "Block the exits! She can't have gone far!" But Lyra was already gone, dragging herself through darkness, following the faint current of cold air that had to lead somewhere. Anywhere but here. She emerged in the kitchens, tumbling out of the shaft and landing hard on the stone floor. A cook screamed, dropping a pot with a clang that made Lyra's ears ring. "Sorry," Lyra gasped, scrambling to her feet. "Emergency!" She ran. Through the kitchens, past startled servants, into the main halls where early morning light was just beginning to creep through the windows. She had to find Rael, had to tell him about the cure, about Senna, about everything. But the fortress was waking up, and wolves were everywhere. She spotted Mira near the great hall and grabbed her arm. "Where's Rael?" Mira's eyes widened at the blood covering Lyra's clothes. "What happened?" "No time. Where is he?" "Training yard, but—" Lyra was already running. But Rael stood in the center of the yard, bare-chested despite the cold, going through combat drills with a focus that bordered on meditation. He looked exhausted, defeated, like a man preparing to die. "Rael!" He spun, and his expression shifted from surprise to alarm when he saw her. "What? Senna has the cure." The words tumbled out in a rush. "She stole it, hid it in the dungeons. She's working with Kadric, I think, or maybe against him, I don't know, but she tried to kill me and—" "Slow down." Rael gripped her shoulders. "You're not making sense." "The Blood Moon roses, they're not destroyed. Senna took them. I found them locked in a cell, and she—" Lyra's voice cracked. "She's framing you, making you look weak so Kadric can take over." Rael's expression went very still. "You're sure?" "I saw them. I can show you." He studied her face, and whatever he saw there must have convinced him because he nodded sharply. "Take me, now, Bishtian." They didn't make it 10 steps before Senna appeared, flanked by Kira and a dozen wolves. Her thigh was bandaged, her face twisted with fury. "Going somewhere, Alpha?" Rael stepped in front of Lyra, voice deadly calm. "Stand down, Senna." "I don't think so." Senna's gaze flicked to Lyra. "Your pet's been causing problems, accusing me of theft, breaking into restricted areas, assaulting pack members." "Because you tried to kill me," Lyra shot back. "Proof?" Senna's smile was cold. "Or is this just another desperate lie from a human who knows she doesn't belong?" Rael's jaw clenched. "Lyra says you have the cure, that you stole it from the garden. And you believe her? Over me?" Senna's voice rose. "I've served you for a decade, Rael, bled for this pack. And you're going to take the word of some human you've known for a month?" "I'm going to investigate," Rael said. "If she's lying, she'll answer for it. But if she's not, If she's not, then what? You'll exile your own beta? Senna stepped forward. The pack is already questioning your leadership. This will only prove them right. Then let them question. Rael's voice dropped to something dangerous. Move aside, Senna, or I'll move you. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then Senna gestured, and the wolves behind her shifted, blocking the path completely. No, she said. I don't think you will. Rael's eyes flashed amber. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was waiting this long. Senna's voice turned sharp. You're weak, Rael, compromised, and this pack deserves better. Then challenge me properly, Rael said. Alpha to alpha, not this coward's game. I'm not the one challenging you, Senna smiled. That honor belongs to Kadric. I'm just making sure you don't run before the fight. I'm not running. Aren't you? Her gaze cut to Lyra. You're certainly distracted. Rael's hands clenched into fists, and Lyra could see the calculation behind his eyes. He could fight, take them all on right here. But that would only prove Senna's point, that he was reckless, unstable, unfit to lead. Lyra made the decision for him. I'll prove it, she said, stepping out from behind Rael. Right now, in front of everyone. Take me to the dungeon. If the cure isn't there, you can exile me. But if it is, Rael finished, Senna answers for treason. Senna's smile faltered, just slightly. Fine, but when we find nothing, I want her gone, permanently. Deal, Lyra said, before Rael could object. Ah, madame. The entire fortress seemed to follow them down to the dungeons. Word had spread fast, something about a stolen cure, accusations of betrayal, the Alpha's judgment being tested. By the time they reached the storage section, dozens of wolves crowded the narrow corridors, watching with hungry eyes. Lyra led them to the cell. The lock was still broken from when she'd picked it earlier. There, she said, pointing. Under the cloth. Rael stepped forward, pulling the door open. The cell was empty. Lyra's heart stopped. No roses. No cloth. Nothing but bare stone and dust. What? She stumbled forward, staring at the space where the cure had been. They were here, I swear, they were right here. Senna's laugh was sharp and cruel. Of course they were. She moved them, Lyra said desperately, turning to Rael. She knew I found them, so she moved them. Rael, you have to believe me. I want to, Rael said quietly, and the pain in his voice made her chest ache. But there's nothing here. A deal's a deal, Senna said. The human leaves. Tonight. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Rael looked at Lyra, and she could see the conflict in his eyes. He believed her. She knew he did. But without proof, he couldn't act, couldn't defend her, not without looking like a fool blinded by attachment. She'd lost. Wait. The voice came from the back of the crowd. Young, uncertain. A wolf pushed forward, barely more than a boy, maybe 17, with nervous eyes and hands that wouldn't stop shaking. He swallowed hard. I saw something. Last night. Senna's expression went very still. What did you see, Tomas? The beta. Tomas's voice trembled, but he kept going. She was down here, with Kira, moving something wrapped in cloth. The corridor went silent. Where did they take it? Rael asked, voice soft. I don't know. They saw me watching and told me to leave. Tomas looked at Senna, and there was fear in his eyes. But I know what I saw. Senna's smile was gone. You're mistaken. I'm not. You're a pup, barely a year into your first shift. You're confused. He's telling the truth, another voice said. This one older, scarred, one of Rael's veterans. I saw them too. Didn't think much of it at the time, but now. More voices joined, confirmation, corroboration. Senna's control was slipping. This is ridiculous, she snapped. You're going to believe children and gossip over your own beta? I'm going to believe evidence, Rael said. His gaze swept the crowd. Search the fortress. Every room, every cell, every storage area. Find those roses. You can't. I can. And I am. He stepped closer to Senna, and the threat in his posture was unmistakable. If they're found anywhere near you or your people, you'll answer for it. Understood? Senna's jaw clenched, but she nodded. The search began. It took 3 hours. They found the roses in Kira's quarters, hidden beneath a false floor panel. All of them, carefully preserved, undamaged. When Rael saw them, his expression went cold and hard. "Bring Senna," he said. "Now." They assembled in the great hall, the entire pack, summoned by the Alpha's order. Senna stood at the center, flanked by guards, her face carefully blank. Rael stood before her, the stolen roses laid out on a table between them. "Explain," he said. One word, flat. Senna's chin lifted. "I was protecting them. By stealing them and hiding them in your second's quarters? By securing them when you were too distracted to notice the threat." Senna's voice turned sharp. "That human came here for the cure. Who's to say she wouldn't try again, or send others? I took precautions." "Precautions." Rael's laugh was bitter. "You destroyed my credibility, made me look weak, let humans die while you played political games." "I did what you refused to do," Senna shot back. "I put the pack first." "You put yourself first." Rael's voice dropped to something lethal. "You wanted me to fail. Wanted Kydrick to take over so you could claim a place at his side. This was never about protection. It was about power." "And what's wrong with that?" Senna's mask cracked, fury bleeding through. "You're weak, Rael. Soft. You let a human live when you should have killed her. You give away our greatest asset to settlements that would destroy us given the chance. You're leading this pack to ruin. So you decided to speed it along?" "I decided to save us." Senna's eyes blazed. "And I'd do it again." The hall erupted in noise, shouts, arguments, wolves taking sides. Rael raised his hand and silence fell. "By pack law," he said, voice carrying, "theft of critical resources is punishable by exile or death. Betrayal of the Alpha's trust carries the same sentence." His gaze locked onto Senna. "You've committed both." "Then kill me." Senna's voice was defiant. "Or are you too weak for that too?" Rael stepped closer, and for a moment Lyra thought he would. The rage in his eyes was palpable, but then he shook his head. "Exile," he said. "Effective immediately. You have until sunset to leave Packlands. If you're found here after that, you'll be executed." Senna's expression twisted with something ugly. "You'll regret this." "I already do." Rael turned away, dismissing her. "Get her out of my sight." Guards moved forward, and Senna was dragged from the hall, still shouting curses and threats. When the doors closed behind her, Rael's shoulders sagged, just slightly. Lyra moved to his side. "You okay?" "No?" He looked at her, and his eyes were haunted. "But I will be." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Rael ordered the roses redistributed immediately, half kept for the pack's reserves, half sent to human settlements with instructions for proper preparation. It wouldn't save everyone, but it was a start. Lyra watched from the sidelines, exhausted and aching, as the fortress slowly returned to some semblance of order. Mira found her in the library that evening, bringing food and fresh bandages. "You did good today," she said, rewrapping the claw marks on Lyra's arm. "I almost got everyone killed." "But you didn't." Mira's smile was genuine. "You exposed a traitor, saved the cure, and made Rael look decisive instead of weak. I'd call that a win. Senna's still out there. Senna's one wolf. She'll survive or she won't." Mira tied off the bandage. "Either way, she's not your problem anymore." Lyra wanted to believe that, but something about the way Senna had looked at her, that cold, calculating fury, made her think this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That night, Rael summoned her to his chambers. He looked better than he had that morning, cleaner, more rested, but there was still tension in the set of his shoulders. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. Lyra sat. For a long moment, Rael said nothing, just poured 2 cups of wine and handed her one. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. Lyra blinked. "For what?" "For doubting you. In the dungeon, when the cell was empty." He met her gaze. "I should have trusted you. You didn't have proof." "I had you. That should have been enough." He took a drink, grimacing. "Senna's betrayal. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there." You can't blame yourself for trusting someone. Can't I? His smile was bitter. She was my second in command, my friend, or so I thought, and she was willing to destroy everything just to prove a point. Not your fault, Lyra said firmly. She made her choices, and you made yours. Rel set down his cup, leaning forward. You could have run, should have run, but you stayed, fought, risked your life to expose her. I told you, I'm not a coward. No. His gaze was intense. You're not. The silence between them felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. Lyra broke it first. What happens now, with Kadrick's challenge? It still stands. Tomorrow night, as planned. Rael's jaw tightened. Senna's exile doesn't change that. Can you beat him? I don't know. The honesty in his voice was startling. He's younger, hungrier, and he's been training for this fight his entire life. So have you. No, I've been training to lead. There's a difference. Rael stood, moving to the window. Leadership isn't about being the strongest. It's about being smart enough to survive when you're not. Lyra joined him, staring out at the moonlit fortress. Then be smart. How? I don't know yet. She glanced at him. But we'll figure it out. Rael's hand found hers, squeezing gently. You keep saying we, because it's true. You know if I lose, Kadrick will kill you. Then don't lose. His laugh was rough. Simple as that? Simple as that. Rael turned to face her fully, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. You're either very brave or very stupid. Can't I be both? Apparently. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. What am I going to do with you? Keep me alive? Lyra suggested. That'd be a good start. I'm working on it. He kissed her then, slow and careful, like he was trying to memorize the moment. Lyra kissed him back, pouring every ounce of stubborn hope into it. When they broke apart, Rael rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow, he said quietly. After the challenge. If I survive. When you survive. When I survive, he amended, we're going to have a very long conversation about what this is. Deal. Good. He stepped back, and the vulnerability in his expression was gone, replaced by the mask of the alpha. Now get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be hell. Aren't they all? He almost smiled. Cat, but sleep didn't come. Lyra lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, mind racing. Tomorrow, Rael would fight Kadrick. And if he lost? No. Not if. When he won. He had to win. But the doubt lingered, cold and insidious. She thought about Kadrick's confidence, his certainty, the way he'd moved through the fortress like he already owned it. And then she thought about what he'd said in the armory. Whoever did it. They're a genius. Because now Rael has no leverage, no cure, no power. At the time, she'd assumed he was talking about the theft. But what if he'd been talking about something else? What if the garden wasn't the only plan? Lyra sat up, heart pounding. Kadrick had been too calm, too unbothered by Senna's exposure. Almost like he'd expected it, like it was part of a larger strategy. She threw off the blankets and dressed quickly, mind racing. If Kadrick had another move planned, something bigger than the garden, bigger than Senna, then Rael walking into that challenge tomorrow was suicide. She had to warn him. But when she reached his chambers, the door was locked, and the guards outside shook their heads. Alpha's orders, no visitors tonight. It's urgent. No exceptions. Lyra cursed under her breath. Fine. If she couldn't warn Rael, she'd find the threat herself. She headed for Kadrick's quarters. His rooms were in the east wing, far from Rael's. Lyra moved through the dark halls carefully, avoiding patrols until she reached his door. Locked. Obviously. But the window beside it was open just a crack. Lyra wedged her fingers into the gap and pulled. The frame creaked but gave, opening wide enough for her to slip through. Inside the room was sparse. Weapons on the walls, maps on the desk, and on the table, papers, letters, correspondence. Lyra rifled through them, pulse racing. Most were mundane supply orders, reports from border patrols. But then she found one sealed with red wax. She broke the seal and read. Her blood went cold. It was a contract, an agreement between Kadrick and a human militia leader named Brennan Cole. The terms were simple. Kadrick would stage a coup, take control of the pack, and then grant the humans access to the Blood Moon Rose Gardens, in exchange for their support in eliminating Rael. The attack on the southern border hadn't been desperation. It had been coordination. Kadrick had orchestrated everything. The theft, the raids, the growing tension between wolves and humans, all to destabilize Rael's leadership and make himself look like the only viable alternative. And tomorrow's challenge was just the final act. Lyra's hands shook as she folded the letter and tucked it into her coat. She had to show Rael. Had to. Looking for something? She spun. Kadrick stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression amused. That's private correspondence, he said mildly. Rude to snoop. Lyra's hand went to her knife. You sold us out. I made an alliance. Kadrick stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. There's a difference. You're working with humans to kill Rael. I'm working with humans to end a war. His tone was patient, like he was explaining something to a child. Rael's obsession with control has kept both sides locked in conflict for years. I'm offering peace. By betraying your own kind. By being pragmatic. Kadrick moved closer, and Lyra backed up until she hit the desk. Rael's way doesn't work. Hoarding the cure, maintaining impossible boundaries, it only breeds resentment. But if I take control, distribute the cure freely, open negotiations, both sides win. And you get to be king. Leader, he corrected. But yes, what about the wolves who don't want peace, who want to fight? They'll adapt, or they won't. Kadrick's smile was cold. Evolution, Lyra. Survival of the fittest. You're insane. I'm realistic. He reached for the letter, but Lyra jerked back. Give me that. No. Lyra. His voice hardened. I like you. I do. But if you try to leave this room with that letter, I'll stop you. Try. She lunged for the window, but Kadrick was faster. He grabbed her arm, yanking her back, and they struggled. The letter fell to the floor, and Lyra stomped on his foot, hard. Kadrick swore, releasing her, and Lyra dove for the letter. Her fingers closed around it just as the door burst open. Rael stood in the doorway, eyes blazing amber, taking in the scene with a single glance. Let her go, he said, voice deadly calm. Kadrick straightened, hands raised in mock surrender. We were just talking. Talking? Rael's gaze flicked to Lyra, to the letter in her hand. What's that? Proof, Lyra said, holding it out. He's working with humans, planning to kill you and take over. Rael took the letter, reading quickly. His expression went very still. Is this true? He asked Kadrick. Every word. Kadrick's smile was sharp. And tomorrow, when I win, it won't matter. You think you've already won. I know I have. Kadrick gestured to the window. Right now, Brennan Cole has 500 armed men camped 2 miles from our border, waiting for my signal. If you win tomorrow, I give the signal and they attack. If I win, I call them off. Either way, Rael, you lose. The room went silent. Rael's jaw clenched, and Lyra could see the calculation behind his eyes. Fight Kadrick and risk a war, or yield and let a traitor take control. No good options. There's a third choice, Lyra said quietly. Both men looked at her. We expose him, she continued, right now, in front of the entire pack. Show them the letter, tell them about the alliance. Let them decide. They'll never believe it, Kadrick said. Rael's already been challenged. Backing out now makes him look weak. He's not backing out, Lyra shot back. He's revealing a traitor. Kadrick's smile faltered. Rael studied the letter again, then looked at Lyra. Something passed between them. Understanding, trust, a decision made without words. All right, he said, we do this your way. Kadrick's expression darkened. You're making a mistake. Probably. Rael folded the letter carefully. But it's mine to make. At them. Within the hour, the entire pack was assembled in the Great Hall again. Twice in one day. Unprecedented. Rael stood at the center, flanked by Lyra and a handful of loyal wolves. Kadric stood opposite, his confidence visibly shaken. "I've called you here," Rael said, voice carrying, "because new evidence has come to light regarding tomorrow's challenge." He held up the letter. "Kadric Vane has been negotiating with human militias, offering them access to our lands, our resources, in exchange for their support in eliminating me." He let the words sink in. "This isn't a challenge for leadership, it's a coup." The hall exploded. Kadric raised his voice over the chaos. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Rael gestured, and one of the guards brought forward a messenger, a young human woman, bound and terrified. "This is Cole's courier, found at the border an hour ago, carrying correspondence between Kadric and the militia." The woman nodded frantically. "It's true. All of it." "She's lying," Kadric insisted. "Under duress." "Then explain the letter," Rael interrupted. "Signed in your hand, sealed with your mark." Kadric's jaw worked. Then, slowly, his expression shifted. The charm fell away, replaced by cold calculation. "Fine," he said. "Yes, I made an alliance. And yes, I plan to take control because someone had to." His gaze swept the crowd. "Rael's too weak to lead, too sentimental. He keeps humans alive when they should be prey. He hoards the cure when it should be freely distributed. He's leading us to extinction, and you're all too blind to see it." "So you decided to sell us out?" someone shouted. "I decided to evolve," Kadric shot back. "The world is changing. We can adapt or die. I chose adaptation." "You chose betrayal," Rael said flatly. "And by pack law, that carries one sentence." Kadric's eyes flashed. "You don't have the strength to enforce it. Try me." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Kadric smiled, sharp, feral, and shifted. The wolf lunged, and chaos erupted. Rael shifted mid-lunge, meeting Kadric in the air with a collision that shook the hall. Lyra stumbled backward as wolves scattered, some shifting to join the fight, others backing away to form a ring around the combatants. The air filled with snarls and the wet sound of claws tearing flesh. This wasn't a duel anymore. It was war. Rael and Kadric were evenly matched, both massive, both scarred from years of violence. They circled, snapping, each looking for an opening. When Kadric lunged, Rael caught him by the throat, slamming him into the stone floor with enough force to crack it. Kadric twisted free, raking claws across Rael's flank, drawing blood. Around them, chaos erupted. Wolves who'd been loyal to Kadric shifted and attacked those loyal to Rael. The hall became a battlefield, violence spreading like wildfire. Lyra pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering. She had no place here, no way to help. She was human, fragile, useless in a fight between predators. But then she saw the human courier, the woman Rael had brought as evidence, cowering near the door, forgotten in the chaos. And beyond her, through the open doorway, more movement. Humans, armed, creeping into the fortress. Cole's militia. They weren't waiting for a signal. They were attacking now. Lyra's blood went cold. If they reached the hall, if they saw the wolves distracted and fighting among themselves, they'd slaughter everyone. She had to warn them, but her voice wouldn't carry over the noise. So she did the only thing she could think of. She ran toward the center of the hall, grabbed a torch from the wall, and threw it at the nearest tapestry. It caught instantly, flames roaring up the fabric, filling the room with smoke and light. The fighting stopped. Every wolf turned, staring at the fire, at Lyra standing in the middle of it all. "Humans!" she shouted, pointing at the door. "Cole's militia is here! They're coming!" For a moment, no one moved. Then Rael shifted back to human form, blood streaming from a dozen wounds, and his voice cut through the shock. "Defensive positions! Now!" The pack moved as one. Loyalties forgotten, grudges set aside, they formed ranks at the entrance. Wolves and humans united by a common threat. Kadric shifted back too, panting, his gaze locked on the doorway. This wasn't supposed to happen yet. "You lose control of your allies?" Rael's voice was sharp with contempt. "How fitting!" "Shut up!" Kadric's jaw clenched. "We need to stop them before—" The first humans burst through the door, armed with swords, crossbows, torches. Brennan Cole led them, a man in his 50s with graying hair and eyes full of righteous fury. "For the cure!" he roared. "For our children!" The wolves met them head on. It was brutal, efficient. Wolves tore through the first wave like they were paper, but more humans poured in, and the sheer numbers began to tell. Crossbow bolts flew, finding targets. Torches set fur alight. Screams filled the air, human and wolf alike. Lyra grabbed a fallen sword, heavier than she expected, and swung at a man charging her. The blade caught him across the arm, and he went down howling. She didn't wait to see if he'd get back up. Beside her, Mira shifted mid-leap, taking down 2 humans at once. "Stay close," she shouted. "Don't be a hero." But Lyra wasn't trying to be a hero. She was trying to survive. She spotted Rael near the center, fighting back-to-back with Kadric of all people, their earlier conflict forgotten in the face of invasion. The sight was surreal. 2 enemies working in perfect sync to defend their home. A human rushed her from the side, and Lyra barely got the sword up in time. The impact jarred her arms, but she held on, twisting away and kicking out. The man stumbled, and a wolf finished him. This was hell, and it wasn't stopping. The tide began to turn when the archers arrived. Wolves on the upper balconies, firing down into the human ranks with brutal precision. Cole's militia hadn't expected organized resistance. They'd thought they'd find a pack in disarray, weakened by internal conflict. They were wrong. Within 20 minutes, the humans began to retreat. Cole himself was dragged down by 3 wolves, disarmed and pinned. He fought like a cornered animal, screaming obscenities, until Rael stood over him. "Yield," Rael said, blood dripping from his claws. "Or die here." Cole spat at him. "You're monsters, all of you." "Maybe." Rael's gaze was cold. "But we're alive, which is more than I can say for your men." He gestured, and the wolves backed off, leaving Cole bleeding but breathing. The remaining humans fled into the night, and the fortress fell silent except for the crackle of dying fires and the groans of the wounded. Lyra dropped the sword, her hand shaking so badly she could barely unclench her fingers. Mira appeared beside her, human again, covered in blood. "You okay? No?" Lyra's voice was barely audible. "Not even close." "Yeah, me neither." Mira offered a tired smile. "But we're alive. For now." The aftermath was worse than the battle. Bodies everywhere, wolf and human both. The wounded needed tending, the dead needed burial, and the fortress itself was damaged, walls scorched and cracked from fire and violence. Rael called an emergency council in the ruins of the Great Hall. What was left of the pack assembled, maybe 200 wolves, down from over 400 before Senna's exile and the battle. Everyone looked exhausted, haunted. Kadric stood to one side, flanked by guards. He'd fought for the pack, but that didn't erase his betrayal. Rael faced him across the scorched floor. "You brought this on us." "I know." Kadric's voice was flat. "I thought I could control them. I was wrong." "You were arrogant." Rael's jaw clenched. "How many of our people died tonight because of your alliance?" 43. The number came from one of the healers, her voice shaking. "And counting." The hall went silent. Kadric closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't bring them back." Rael stepped closer. "By pack law, you should be executed. Traitors don't get second chances." "Then do it." Kadric met his gaze. "I won't fight you." Rael stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to the assembled wolves. "This is your pack too. You decide. Exile or death." The silence stretched. Finally, one of the veterans spoke up, a woman with silver hair and scars that told decades of stories. "Exile. We've lost enough today." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Rael nodded slowly. "Exile it is. You have until dawn to leave. If you ever return, you'll be killed on sight." Kadric's expression didn't change. He just nodded, turned, and walked away. Lyra watched him go, feeling nothing but exhaustion. The next 3 days were a blur. Cleanup, repairs, negotiations with the surviving humans. Cole's militia had been decimated, and the ones who remained wanted peace, not more bloodshed. Rael worked tirelessly, meeting with human leaders, setting up terms for distribution of the Blood Moon Rose, establishing boundaries that both sides could live with. Lyra stayed by his side through most of it, acting as translator, mediator, proof that cooperation was possible. It wasn't easy. Trust was fragile, but slowly, painfully, something began to shift. On the fourth day, Rael received word from Ashvale. Her father was alive, recovering, asking about her. Lyra read the letter 3 times before it sank in. He'd survived. She'd saved him. That had been the whole point, hadn't it? Cross the border, steal the cure, save her father. Mission accomplished. So why did she feel so hollow? She found Rael in the garden, the new one, hastily planted with cuttings salvaged from the stolen roses. He was kneeling in the dirt, hands gentle as he checked the soil. "You're good at that," Lyra said. He glanced up, surprised. "At what?" "Growing things, taking care of them." She moved closer. "I wouldn't have expected it. Everyone needs a hobby." Rael stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "Keeps me sane." "Does it work?" "Not really." His smile was tired. "But I try." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the young plant sway in the breeze. Finally, Lyra spoke. "I got word from home. My father's recovering." "That's good." Rael's expression softened. "I'm glad." "Me too." She hesitated. "He wants me to come home." The words hung between them. Rael's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Of course he does." "I told him I needed time to think." "About what?" Lyra met his gaze. "About what I want. Not what I came here for or what anyone expects. Just what I want." "And what do you want?" The question was simple. The answer wasn't. Lyra had spent so long focused on survival, on saving her father, on proving herself, on just making it through each day, that she'd never stopped to think about what came after. But standing here, in a garden built from ashes, beside a man who'd become more than she ever expected, the answer felt suddenly, terrifyingly clear. "I want to stay," she said quietly. Rael's eyes widened. "What?" "I want to stay. Here. With you. With the pack." The words came faster now, tumbling out. "I know it's insane. I know I'm human, and this isn't my world, and there are 1,000 reasons it won't work, but I don't care. I've never felt like I belonged anywhere until I came here, and I'm not ready to give that up." "Lyra," Rael's voice was rough, "you don't know what you're asking." "I do. I'm asking to stay. I'm asking for a chance to build something here. With you." She stepped closer. "Unless you don't want that." "Don't want?" He laughed, the sound broken. "I've wanted that since the moment you refused to back down in the snow, but I never thought you'd choose this." "Why not?" "Because it's hard and dangerous, and you deserve better." "Better than what? A boring life in a settlement where nothing ever changes?" Lyra shook her head. "I crossed a forbidden border to save my father. I survived assassination attempts, won a trial by combat, and helped stop a war. You think I'm going to walk away from that for safe?" "You might." "I won't." She reached up, cupping his face. "I'm not leaving, Rael, not unless you tell me to go." "I won't." His hands found her waist, pulling her closer. "I can't." Then it settled. "Just like that?" "Just like that." He kissed her then, deep and fierce and full of promise. And when they broke apart, Lyra saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Hope. The official announcement came a week later. Rael stood before the assembled pack, Lyra at his side, and declared her a permanent member. Not a prisoner, not a guest. Pack. There was resistance, of course, murmurs of discontent, wolves who thought humans had no place among them. But there were also voices of support, wolves who'd fought beside her, who'd seen her bleed and refused to break. Mira was the loudest. "She's earned it. Anyone who says otherwise can take it up with me." No one did. The vote passed. Narrowly, but it passed. Lyra was pack. 3 months later, Lyra stood at the border, the same spot where she'd crossed that freezing night that felt like a lifetime ago. But this time, she wasn't sneaking. She was escorting a caravan of humans from Ashvale, bringing them to the fortress for the first official trade meeting. Her father was among them. He looked older than she remembered, thinner, grayer, but alive. His eyes lit up when he saw her, and he pulled her into a fierce hug that made her ribs ache. "I thought I'd lost you," he said, voice thick. "Never." Lyra held him tight. "I'm sorry it took so long to come back." "You were saving lives, building peace." He pulled back, studying her face. "You look different." "I am different," she smiled. "Is that okay?" "As long as you're happy." "I am." And she meant it. Her father met Rael with the wariness of a man facing a predator, but Rael was courteous, respectful, careful not to loom or intimidate. "Your daughter," Rael said, "is remarkable." "I know." Her father's gaze flicked between them, and something understanding passed across his face. "Take care of her." "I will." "And she'll take care of you." Her father smiled faintly. "That's how she is." "I've noticed." The trade talks went better than anyone expected. Boundaries were redrawn, trade routes established. The blood moon rose would be distributed fairly, with wolves maintaining control, but humans given access through official channels. It wasn't perfect. There were still tensions, still distrust, but it was a start, and starts mattered. Lyra watched from the sidelines as agreements were signed, hands shaken, alliances formed. She'd helped build this. A world where wolves and humans didn't just coexist, they cooperated. It felt impossible, fragile, beautiful. That night, as the humans settled into guest quarters and the fortress slowly relaxed, Rael found her on the battlements, staring out at the mountains. "Thinking?" he asked. "Always." She glanced at him. "Do you think it'll last? This peace?" "Honestly, I don't know." He leaned against the stone beside her. "But I think we have a chance. That's more than we had before." "Because of the cure?" "Because of you." Rael's gaze was serious. "You showed both sides that cooperation is possible, that we don't have to be enemies. I just did what needed to be done." "Exactly." He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. "You see a problem, you fix it. Even when it's terrifying, even when everyone tells you it's impossible." "Sounds exhausting when you put it like that." "It is." His smile was soft. "But it's also why I love you." Lyra's breath caught. "What?" "I love you." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I have for a while now. Just didn't know how to say it." "You just did." "Yeah." He looked almost shy. "Is that okay?" Lyra laughed, surprised and delighted and overwhelmed. "You're asking if it's okay that you love me?" Seemed polite. "You're an idiot." She pulled him close, kissing him until they were both breathless. "Of course it's okay, because I love you too." Rael's arms tightened around her. "Really? Really?" She rested her forehead against his. "I crossed a forbidden border, survived wolves trying to kill me, and helped stop a war. Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done." "I don't deserve you." "Probably not." She grinned. "But you're stuck with me anyway." "Good." He kissed her again, slower this time. "Because I'm not letting go." Months. 6 months after that, the garden was thriving. Blood moon roses bloomed in abundance, their petals shimmering in the sunlight. Lyra walked through the rows, checking each plant with the care Rael had taught her. She wasn't just his partner anymore. She was co-administrator of the Cure Distribution Program, working with both human and wolf healers to ensure no one was left behind. It was exhausting work, frustrating, but it mattered. And she was good at it. Mira appeared at the garden entrance, grinning. "You're needed in the hall. Council meeting." "Another one?" Lyra groaned. "We just had one yesterday." "Welcome to leadership." Mira's grin widened. "It's all meetings and politics now. I miss the days when people just tried to kill me. It was simpler." "Liar. You love this." Lyra smiled despite herself. "Maybe a little." They walked to the hall together, and Lyra felt a sense of belonging settle deep in her chest. This was home. These people, wolf and human alike, were her family. She'd come here to steal a flower and save one life. Instead, she'd changed an entire world. Walt. The council meeting was predictably chaotic. Wolves arguing with humans, humans arguing with each other, everyone talking over everyone else. Lyra sat beside Rael, occasionally interjecting when things got too heated, but mostly just observing. This was the new normal. Messy, complicated, alive. At one point, Rael leaned over, voice low. Still think this was a good idea. Staying. All of it. The peace, the cooperation. He gestured at the arguing council. This. Lyra looked around the room, at faces that had once been enemies now working together, however imperfectly. At the future they were building, one painful compromise at a time. Yeah, she said. I do. Even though it's hard. Especially because it's hard. She met his gaze. Nothing worth doing is easy. Rael's smile was warm. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just didn't notice. He laughed, and the sound filled something in Lyra's chest she hadn't known was empty. That night, as they lay in bed together, Rael's head on her shoulder, Lyra stared at the ceiling and thought about the journey that had brought her here. One desperate act, one impossible choice, and everything had changed. Rael? She said quietly. Do you ever regret not killing me that first night? He lifted his head, looking at her with those amber eyes that had once terrified her. Every day. Lyra's heart clenched. Because if I had, he continued, I'd never have known what it's like to love someone who challenges me, who makes me better, who chose this life not because she had to, but because she wanted to. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. So no, I don't regret it. Best decision I ever made. Lyra's throat tightened. Even though I'm human? Especially because you're human. His voice was firm. You saw the worst of us and stayed anyway. That takes courage I'm not sure I have. You have plenty of courage. Different kind. He settled back against her. You're the brave one, Lyra. Don't forget that. She wouldn't. A year after she'd first crossed the border, Lyra stood at the fortress gates and watched as a group of human children arrived for the first joint education program. Wolf pups and human kids, learning together, playing together, building a future together. It was Lyra's idea, one of many she'd proposed and somehow convinced the council to approve. The resistance had been fierce, but she'd worn them down with persistence and logic and sheer stubborn will. Rael stood beside her, watching with something like wonder. This is going to change everything, he said. I know, Lyra smiled. That's the point. You're terrifying when you want to be. I learned from the best. He pulled her close, and they stood there together as the children ran past, laughing and shouting, oblivious to the history that had tried to keep them apart. This was the world Lyra had fought for. Not perfect, not easy, but possible. And that was enough. Years later, when travelers passed through wolf territory and asked about the human woman who lived among predators, they'd hear the story. How she'd crossed a forbidden border to steal a cure. How she'd been caught by the Alpha King himself. How she'd survived trials and assassination attempts and a war that should have destroyed everything. And how she'd stayed. Not as a prisoner, not as a symbol, as Pack. The story grew with each telling, details shifting, but the core remained the same. A desperate woman, an impossible choice, and a world reborn. Lyra heard the stories sometimes, barely recognizing herself in them. She'd become a legend without meaning to, just by refusing to give up. But she didn't dwell on it. She was too busy living, running the distribution program, mediating disputes, raising the children she and Rael had somehow managed to have despite all biological odds, teaching them that walls were meant to be crossed and borders were meant to be redrawn. Sometimes she thought about that night in the snow, the fear, the certainty that she'd die. And then she looked at what she'd built, what they'd all built together, and knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth it. Every bruise, every scar, every impossible choice. Worth it. On the anniversary of her first crossing, Lyra stood at the border again. Not alone this time. Rael beside her. Their children, two impossibilities named Kira and Ash, chasing each other through the snow. Mira and her mate watching with fond exasperation. The boundary marker was still there, weathered but standing. a reminder of what used to be. Should we take it down? Rael asked. Lyra considered. No, leave it. A reminder. Of what? That borders only matter if we let them. She squeezed his hand, and we don't. He smiled, pulling her into a kiss that tasted like home. Their children made exaggerated gagging noises, and Lyra laughed against Rael's mouth. This was her life now. Chaotic, complicated, perfect in its imperfection. She'd come here to save one life and ended up changing thousands. Not bad for a desperate woman from the frontier who didn't know when to quit. Not bad at all. The blood moon rose bloomed eternal, its petals carrying hope to every corner of a world slowly learning that survival didn't mean isolation. And at the heart of it all was Lyra Hale. No longer just human, no longer just pack. Something new, something impossible. A bridge between worlds, built from courage and stubbornness and love. The legend lived on. But the woman? She was too busy building the future to worry about the past. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all.